Hey everybody, welcome to Love and Reload, the voice of the relocation industry. I am your host, Ben Cross, and I am joined by the illustrious Mel Smith. What's up, Mel? How you doing?
What's up, my man? How are you feeling today?
Dude, I'm doing fantastic. I'm so happy you're here, man. Hey, before we hop into it, I want to go ahead and do a quick plug. We're plugging Mercy Joy Ministries. Janet, can we roll that? Donate to Mercy Joy Ministries, sponsor a child in Uganda. Visit www.mercyjoyministries.org. Shout out to William Wiggins. Shout out to Allison Wiggins. Shout out to the Archbishop of Uganda, who is now a personal friend of mine. Go ahead and sponsor a child out there in Uganda, mercyjoyministries.org. They got kids K through 12. They got vocational young people. Just go ahead and do that because it's great. It's a blessing. But moving on. Thank you, Jan. Appreciate it. Moving on. Mel, it's so good to have you here, man. I haven't seen you in forever. I used to run into you at the IAM conference. Right. I feel like Mel, you originally caught my eye. Okay, I'm gonna just. Before people show up here, I'm just going to man crush for a second. You originally caught my eye because you were rocking. I want to say it was a 3-piece, super tailored. I never had the waistline that like you did, but it was super tailored, and just looking just so smart and dapper. And I'm just like, Mel, as a fellow sartorialist, why did you always come so correct to the IAM conference?
Thank you very much. I appreciate the compliment. But I could say I feel the same way when I see you. It's like, showing up professional, looking smart. Mm-hmm. Part of that is because of how I was raised as a kid. I always remember my dad getting dressed to go to church on Sunday mornings, and he was the head of a dining services, a nursing home. So he wasn't wearing a suit to work. But a part of that British Jamaican culture was you macked out on Sunday, cufflinks, ties, so you're always looking clean. And then when I started my professional career, started with internships. I was working at IBM as a 19-year-old in New York City. And after that, I got into my first part of my career. I was working as an insurance broker in New York City as well. And there was the full-on suspenders, pocket square.
Yeah.
That was the way you had to kind of show out. And somebody once said that to me. It's like, always dress for the job that you want to have. And from looking at my career, I worked for Grable, and Dave Grable always was very polished and always presented himself like that. And I just thought it was a part of who I was culturally and what I aspired to be. Is like, make yourself stand out in a kind of self-defacing way. It's like, I'm not tall and I'm not short. You don't know what I'm about until you get this close to me. But I got to have some way to get you engaged, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So maybe that's a
starter for sure. And I like that too, because if you don't know anything else about a person, like a handful of things. I actually was talking to I was talking to Diane Ayers about this from Porchlight, and she was like, age, race, gender, and what you're wearing.
Right.
And it's like, so you got these 4 things about somebody in the first second you meet them. Right. And most people make a decision about somebody in the first couple seconds they meet them. So you might as well, give yourself every opportunity. You know what I mean? Because
that's absolutely right. And I think what's also interesting about that to me is that I remember when I used to read those early days when I was reading sales training books, I had no idea what I was doing. And everybody has to kind of figure stuff out really, when they start. And it was Brian Tracy used to always say, hey, look like this, dress like this, be professional. I would hear some off the cuff things, but people saying, well, I know he's a good salesman because his shoes are shined. You know what I mean? So part of that, it was just business and culturation, how it was inculcated in me, definitely the way my family was raised. That was a part of it as well. But I just think it also, even it's kind of weird, but for a while in my life, I was reading a lot of books on yoga and yoga meditation, and I have a few friends that are very heavily involved in this. And one of the things they would always say, which you don't expect people who are trying to dealing with this higher consciousness world, is that there has to be some splendor. You always have to find something to engage people and attract people because we're multimedia beings. Some of us do not have all of those, our senses. Some of us have limited abilities with our senses. And so, but you still want to make sure that, hey, you can attract what you can attract, right? And that's the way nature makes us anyway, right? That's the way why the peacock is the way it is, and
the peacock, there you go,
are the way they are. So maybe that's a part of it,
I love it. I love it. And then every other species besides humans, the male is the more beautiful.
Well, more adorned, I like to say, because I think guys should be polished and delivered, have that kind of splendor to them. I know that they
not in human beings, though. Not in human beings.
Definitely not.
Hey, we got people checking in right now. Hey, if you're watching right now, I'm so happy you're here. Mel is one of my favorite people to just chop it up with. So I'm so happy he's here. Hit us up in the comments. Leave questions for Mel. We're going to hear about his story. We're going to hear about what the heck he's even doing nowadays, hear about purpose, finding all that kind of stuff. So I'm super excited you're here. Go ahead and leave it in the comments. Hit that like button also. Send a little heart out to Mel. Let's see what we got here. We got Rory checking in.
Rory, how you doing? Thanks for joining.
In Illinois. We got Jamie Massler in Mississippi checking in.
Hi, Jamie. What's up? Thanks for joining us.
We got Mary O'Donnell here.
Hi, Mary.
It's been a while from SoCal. What's up? Elena in the DC.
Good. Thank you for coming on, Elena. It's been a while. Nice to see you here.
Elena's awesome. Elena's so awesome. But I wanted to start there, right? So how did you get into relocation? What was that first entree into the business?
Wow, this is a good story, and I'm going to try to give you the short version because it does take it's over a time period of 10 years. My first summer out of school at NYU, I had a job working for a tree service company.
Wait, time. I got to stop you already.
Yeah.
You went to NYU, man.
Yeah, yes,
you over here. You're the. How did you start at NYU? Okay, well, Tom, what'd you study at NYU?
I actually went into school to be a speech therapist.
Okay.
I was fascinated with language acquisition, and the original path was to try to work with the deaf and hard of hearing, right?
Okay.
And people with speech impediments. During that process, I got a taste for working in business because I did a couple internships, and I did an internship with IBM, and I started looking at the practical aspects of it, and then, wow, if I get out of school, I can't even afford to pay my tuition. That
NYU tuition is no joke.
And it was, it was really one of those kind of moments of realization, like, okay, this is what I'd like to do. What do I have to do, right? Or to be able to eat, live, pay rent, mortgage, whatever. So, so the first summer out, I worked for a tree service company in upstate New York, well, Westchester County in Chappaqua, New York.
Chappaqua. I'm from White Plains.
There you go.
White Plains, Westchester in the house.
That's why we connected too. I grew up in Westchester, Ossining, New York. I lived and worked in White Plains, New York. My mom spent her whole bunch of time at like 20 years at AT&T in White Plains before she finished off in Orlando. So it's near and dear to me, right?
There you go.
So finished school. I am working as a corporate insurance broker, and in a risk management division. So I was doing a lot of placing risks in third-party liability, which means workers' compensation, automobile liability, and general liability, and putting together rates for submission. The companies that I worked with had to have $1 million in premium exposure, or more. So it was like the global 500 types of organizations. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And, but it really wasn't my cup of tea. I really was interested in ocean, marine, and international. So I was always kind of gravitating towards those things. So fast forward, and me maybe annoying the company enough and them saying, there's no place for you. You just stay here. There was a parting of the ways. And I was thinking, well, you know what? I'm going to leave New York. I'm going to go to Florida and take the LSATs and go to law school. That's
okay.
I've got a brother who's an attorney. And so, my sister was a paralegal. She wanted to be an attorney. So I thought maybe I could do this. Who knows, right? Anyway, I got into, I was getting ready to leave Florida in the winter. It was a really brutal winter. Up there, man, what it's like.
Rough. Some of those winters are rough.
Right?
Nor'easters, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I was restoring a vintage sports car at the time. It was a 1971 Volvo P1800. And I'm driving, I pick it up from the shop, and it's dark and cold. On the way home, I was a manual transmission, hit a patch of ice, did a 180 across 3 lanes, one with me, one on, and 2 oncoming. Crashed the car. I was fine, totaled the car. And I'm like, wow, now I'm stuck in New York. I can't get anyone to come out and do the assessment for the damage. So I'm flipping through, newspapers and biding my time, waiting for someone to come out and do the claim. The adjuster to come out and do the claim survey. And I opened up a news pamphlet. It was the penny saver. That's how far it goes back. When you remember
penny saver. I remember the penny saver.
And I saw a shipping company needed an insurance manager. I was like, well, I got time to kill. Let me call them. So I called them and I got the interview. I walk into the interview and I meet the assistant to the president. They talk me through the interview and then they give me a geography test. And the only thing that I got wrong or I didn't know was the port city in Norway, Stavanger. Had no idea, right, where that was.
Yeah, I mean, you would have got me on that one. Okay.
Right. So and this is the first time I put on my resume that I spoke German. And literally,
you speak German?
Yep.
How'd you learn? I'm sorry. Here's how this goes, by the way. If you didn't know how Love and Relo goes, it goes all over the place. Okay.
Yeah.
You say NYU, I stop. You say German, I stop. There's a few buzzwords. Okay, I stop. So just how did you learn? When did you learn German?
Well, as a kid, my father worked. His boss was German, and we took a trip to go to Europe, partly because he's Jamaican by birth. A lot of his godmother, who was his de facto mom, moved to England. So we traveled around, and when we were planning on going to visit her, the second trip after going back home to Jamaica, back home, my dad's boss, he became really good friends with, said, hey, why don't you go to my country and visit it? And when I was 10 years old, I saw these words that looked like English words. So I kind of had this latent fascination with wanting to learn the language. When I was working as an insurance broker in international, I became good friends with a couple of German guys.
Yeah.
And as I was finishing up school at the same time, and one of the guys said to me, Mel, all these Germans, and you're the only one that doesn't speak, German. So we always have to speak English for you. And I thought, how hard could it be to learn German? Yeah, right.
How hard could it be? Well, German is one of the root languages of the English language.
Right. Actually, a family, part of the language family. I found a little, and I say this with all due respect and admiration, a little old lady that I would go to every week and spend an hour studying German with her. And I did that for about 84 weeks. And in the meantime, I'd go back and forth to visit some of my friends in Germany.
How old were you at this time?
I was in my early 20s.
Okay.
Early 20s.
So you were taking German lessons. Okay.
Right.
Got
it. Early 20s. And also because professionally, the German wall, the Berlin Wall had just come down, and Germans were, major players in finance. And they were buying up a lot of the former East Bloc insurers, right? So I thought, okay. And my German friends would say, look, if you're German, if you don't speak another language, you don't have a career. You're going to be
right.
So it also plays into relocation.
So you speak German. Now you're interviewing for this job, right? And you go to the port city in Norway, and then the guy says, "What?"
So the assistant to the president says, "So you speak German, huh?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm sweating." I'm like, "Yeah." So she says, "Come on in. The president of the company wants to meet you." So I walk into her office. It was Monica Ady at the time. Some of you guys might remember that name. And she started speaking to me in German. So we have a conversation about 5-10 minutes in German. And she looks at me and she says, in English, she says, you speak better German than my husband. He's not German, by the way. He was an American, but he lived in Germany. He says, did you ever think about working in sales? And I'm thinking sales, shipping, Aristotle and NASA. Sure.
Aristotle, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a leap there, but okay. Yeah. Right. Okay.
Quite a leap. That's all I knew about it. Right. So I went in for one job and she said, "Oh, we'll come back and meet the owner. He's traveling right now, but whatever." So I said, "Okay." Not thinking much of it. I'm thinking, this is nothing. I said, "Oh, look, I'm going to be in Florida. So if you're interested, call me." Basically left it at that. Go to Florida, down there for about 3 weeks. Looking for a place to live, I get a call. It's Interconics.
Oh, Interconics. Okay, all right.
And they said, "Hey, come on back up, and the owner's going to be in town." So went back up to New York. Everything is going wrong the day of the interview. Right, I'm late. I don't have my own car, so Dad's coming from work. He's giving me his car, and I'm running late and all this stuff. I had to stop at a payphone at a gas station. Payphone, right? Pre-sale days. And they said, "Oh, no problem. Come on in when you get here." While I'd been in Florida, I'd been reading Stephen Covey's 7 Habits for Highly Effective People. I think that's what the title is, if I remember correctly. And got into the office, sat down in the reception area, and I was thinking, okay, I got to find something to talk about that'll be an icebreaker, right? And I'm looking around the office in the waiting room, in the waiting area, trying to figure out what I should bring up. And the receptionist walks out of the office, to go to the ladies' room. And I thought to myself, I jumped up, and I don't know what possessed me to do this. I jumped up, ran to her desk, and looked over her desk, and I saw the phone roster. And the first name on the phone roster, I'm like, oh my God, how many people could have that name? So
wait, talking about what was the first name on the phone roster?
The first name on the roster was Achek, Acheck.
Okay.
Okay. And so out walks the assistant. She said, well, Mr. Achek is ready to see you now. And I said, is his first name Lionel? She's like, yeah, how did you know that? So I walk into his office, and it's a magnificent office. It was in White Plains, New York, right by the train station on Main Street. I think that was right? You know what I'm talking about.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
The whole wall was glass.
Yeah.
And standing on an elevated platform, massive, this beautiful, wood carved desk. The office was bigger than my apartment in White Plains, right? And I walked in, and he's like, Mel Smith. And I said, your name is Lionel Chuck? He's like, yeah. I said, you have a house in this part of Westchester? I'm not going to get too specific, right? I'm sure some privacy, right? He's like, yeah. And I said, you have these 2 stone lions at the entry gate? And he goes, yeah. And he said, it's a marble gravel driveway at about a quarter of a mile up to the house. He's like, yeah. And his eyes are getting bigger, and he's leaning forward and further and further forward. And I said, you have a tennis court on this side of the property, and then a greenhouse over here? And he's like, yeah. And I said, you got a German Shepherd, right? And he's like, how do you know that? And I said, do you remember the Peterkin brothers? And he goes, well, they did some work for me in my yard. I said, yeah, the Peterkin brothers, they had the tree service in Chappaqua. He said, yeah. Said, there are 3 houses I can describe to you to this day. One of them is yours, but you're the only client whose name I remember. And he stopped, paused for a couple seconds, looked at me and said, you're hired. You can start on Monday. That's how I got into this industry.
What? You were doing landscaping for this guy, and then all of a sudden you walk into his house, or you walk into his office, and you have a photographic memory of his property, which probably freaked him out.
It did freak him out. He looked at me and he said, I thought you
were a stack of cash in the bedside drawer.
I remember the German Shepherd. I remembered the name of the groundskeeper who was still working for him, because he was the only person be on property when we went up there. And that's how I got into the business.
Oh my God.
It's really household goods, international household goods removals, but that's the story. That's
tremendous. I love that story. I want to hear your comments and your questions out there. You're watching this right now. Seeing people are hitting the applause button. They're hitting that like button for Mel. What a phenomenal story. We got people checking in here. Michael Quigley checking in.
Let's do it.
California. Quigs, what's up? Stay safe up there in Cali, man. We've got our good buddy here, Mark Moose.
Hey, Mussy. That's my brother right there. How you doing, Mussy?
Got the whole family watching over there.
William, Martin. Hi, Ildi.
That's great.
Love you.
Yep, he's probably into the Pernod right now. Hey, Janaina checking in. And Mark, give us your favorite Mel story. I want to hear some Mel questions and Mel stories here.
If anybody knows, it'll be
yeah, exactly. Give me the good stuff here. Janaina from Brazil checking in. Good to see you from Rio. Loving Rio. Francine Drusty. Hi.
Hi, Francine.
And Francine shouting out Janet there. There you go. And Jamie. Binghamton. We got a Binghamton shout out.
New York in the house.
Bearcats. Let's see here. Francine, White Plains, Westchester is booming right now. Yeah, it is booming. I got a funny story about this. So I was at a CRC, Chicago Relocation Council meeting 3 years ago, and they had Bill Rancic, the guy from The Apprentice, right? They had Bill Rancic speaking. He was the speaker, right? And afterwards, you all line up and you take a picture, And so I lined up. I was talking to my wife about this over wine. She mentioned Bill Rancic. I was like, I know Bill Rancic. She's like, you don't know Bill Rancic. I was like, yeah, here's a picture. So I'm online with, and I'm sitting up there with Bill Rancic. We're doing this thing like this. They're talking, And I was like, hey, I'm from White Plains too. He's like, oh yeah, Joey Bada Boom or whatever. I'm like, no, I don't know Joey Bada Boom. Billy Bada Da. I was like, no, I don't know. I was like, Bill, I don't think we run in the same circles. He was talking about developing the whole Trump Tower in downtown White Plains, And I'm like, wow. I don't think we know the same people. I did not make it to The Apprentice, Bill. I'm here paying for a photo with you right now.
That's
funny. Gosh, it's so funny. Jamie Master checking in here. We got Gordon Bell from Asian Tigers. What's up, Gordon? Hey, Ben. Good to listen to the DeWitt story. Let's riff on that just for a minute. So you got hired by Interconics, but now you're at DeWitt, man. Tell us about what DeWitt is all about for people that aren't familiar with DeWitt, and what do you do?
Well, those are all good questions. I mean, DeWitt is, I think that's the fourth generation family company, about 97 years old. Their majority of their locations are on the West Coast. So they're in San Diego, Los Angeles, they're in Alaska, Hawaii, Guam. So they cover Northern Mariana. They have 7 locations on the islands of Hawaii. So they also do a lot of Department of State work, one of the higher ranked ITGBL carriers for the Department of State.
And just to be clear, shipping company, moving company?
Well, that's a good question. DeWitt is a family of 5 companies. DeWitt Move Worldwide, Royal Alaskan, Royal Hawaii, DeWitt Guam, and their headquarters and approved freight forwarder in Los Angeles, City of Industry. So they actually do all services. They can be a 3PL. We have our own crews and folks on the ground, warehouses in those areas I mentioned, Los Angeles, in Alaska, in Hawaii, and in Guam. So for the rest of the U.S., we rely on our agent relationships just like we do overseas and internationally. So that's the scope of the company, but we are able to do freight forwarding, 3PL logistics. We're made a foray, and one of the reasons they brought me on, I am the director of government business development with some corporate opportunities thrown in there. But that's what my background has been, and they wanted to expand what they were doing with federal agencies. So they, as a kind of a DC guy now for like the last 20 years, even though my career didn't start in DC, this is where the longest exposure has been. And so we're working a lot now with NGOs, with the relief and development organizations, with federal agencies that are also doing emergency management, that are involved in logistics of all sorts. So
yeah, so give me like an idea of some of the product or whatever. Some of the tell me kind of a story, because I think a lot of people that are watching right now in the relocation world, right, and they understand household goods. They obviously understand relocation management, policy, things like this. You guys do household goods moving, yes, but you also have like this other side of your business that you kind of manage, if you will. And tell me kind of about some of that. Give me some ideas of what that is like.
So what I've been able to develop in the last 15 or so years is working with relief and development organizations. Those are humanitarian organizations, and also organizations that are funded by USAID, which is United States Agency for International Development. So those are all various types of organizations that either work in different sectors to promote the development of what we call the developing world. The old term that's not really an accepted term anymore is what people used to call the third world countries. So these are countries that are underdeveloped in human capacity. Maybe they don't have the education infrastructure that we're afforded in the United States or in Western Europe and some other parts of the world. And for some countries, there might be a lot of opportunity, but it's limited, relatively limited. Like, for example, you're talking about some of the Eastern European countries that have some types of development issues, so that everybody cannot get access to that type of education, right, that we can get in the United States. It could be organizations or that work with human rights. So where there's a violation of human rights or lack of opportunity for human rights across the board, we're working there. Countries that might need election governance. So countries that are coming out of like a conflict, and they're trying to establish a democratic government. Who needs election monitoring? Might send people to the country to monitor elections. We might sell ballot boxes to the country so they can actually do mail, like we're doing right now, as a matter of fact, paper ballots, because a lot of the world still does paper ballots. There was a period of several years where I managed all the air freight for Save the Children UK, and manage that with a partner. So they would do things like send prenatal caps to Lesotho, the country, landlocked country inside Southern Africa.
Right, that's a country within South Africa, right?
Right, correct.
And we actually have Relocation Africa that's going to be on this week. Renee Stegman over there, who's down in South Africa also. So it's been one of our first people from the continent of Africa. If you've got questions for Mel about shipping things to emerging markets, some of the stuff he's done with NGOs. I'd love to hear those questions in here. I want to hear more about the actual kind of commodities and things that that you're shipping over there too, Mel. We got a couple of people here, shout outs here. Francine, we got Richard coming in from London.
Hi, Rich. Hi, Francine.
We got Roger Wise.
Thank you, Roger.
Janice says the Lions mean the house was paid for.
Yeah.
I know with the Lions, people love this story. It's such a great story. Laura Gazian coming to you from New York City. Follow Laura on Instagram. Her neighborhood stuff is fantastic. Wow. Fernando coming to us from Sao Paulo, Brazil. Victoria in Dallas. Hello, Ben and Mel. What's up, Victoria? Mark actually has a question. Tell us about some of the emergency work you have had to cover.
Well, that is really interesting. So, as I said, part of what we're doing as we're emerging here with DeWitt is being able to deal with natural disasters, and I'll engage with that some more because part of what I think many of the people that are on are probably members of IAM, and there's an IAM committee called Here to Help. So, without getting too specific, there are some federal agencies and some volunteer agencies that are dealing with the disasters in Louisiana, for example, right now, the fires out in California, and what we do and a lot of this stuff, they do have contracted vendors, but there's no real formula for handling an emergency. There's preparedness you can do, but everything is different, and every situation has an impact on humans' lives, right? And it's even post occurrence.
Okay.
What you're talking about is there clean water to drink? Is there water that you can bathe with? Do you have enough food? And then can you access the areas where the disaster is? Are the roads still intact? Are the bridges still intact?
See, this is interesting because the first thing I think of when you talk about shipping, products to these types of affected areas, the first thing I think of is food.
Right.
Is it a lot of bulk food, or what else is it specifically that might be shipped?
Those are very good questions. So when you talk about a response to a disaster, you're talking about first responders, right? Those are the ones that are saving lives, right, at risk. And then you talk about those who are going to sustain life once you get there. So where are people going to shelter? Where are they going to? Will they have access to hygiene? What are they going to eat? Right. So I'll give you a case in point when two things that I remember, like the earthquake in Haiti, and then the recent the hurricane that affected Puerto Rico.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times the federal agencies or the humanitarian organizations that are trying to be the first ones on the scene to assess and evaluate things, they also get a lot of flack. But what people fail to understand is that there are issues that happen in a disaster that impact your safety and your security. Not just the safety and security for the individuals, because crimes are being committed as well. There's violence against women that's being committed. There are the foods that you're sending are now potentially being hijacked. That's what happened in Haiti, where it's why it's difficult to get there, because this is a commodity that people need to sustain life. So when you have these disasters, you have to think about also what security assessments need to be made, and how you're going to provide security for those people that are in this vulnerable position, right, as well. So that goes with it. As far as even the situation in Puerto Rico, you literally, I've talked with the people at the emergency management associations about this, and other people that were private institutions are trying to help. You couldn't land planes. You couldn't access the ports because there were swells and there was standing water on the tarmac. So you couldn't actually even land a plane. So there's a whole, array of things that have to go into responding after that. And then people think you can just send food down there or make a donation of stacks of.
Right.
Well,
we're over here just texting the Red Cross, like, here's my $10 or whatever. Right. But we don't really know how that stuff gets from A to B and how it gets deployed. I mean, I remember after Puerto Rico, people went in there and they found water and other things that were been in warehouses or being stored that just was never deployed. Of course, sometimes it expires and things like that. So, I mean, how do you overcome, how do you overcome, what are some of those logistical challenges like you kind of described, but then like what are some solutions to common logistical challenges like that? Because we do have people that are logisticians on you know, that are watching this probably might be interested in some of that stuff.
There are a couple of things, and that's a really good question. So let me just, I want to highlight a couple of things about associations and organizations, right? So within IAM, excuse me, I'm on a committee called Here to Help, and it's a relatively new committee, but what we're trying to do is mobilize the resources of our members worldwide and then get them connected with other humanitarian organizations that are responding to emergencies and responding to emergency disasters to help. First of all, it's a campaign of awareness. There are surprisingly few organizations in transportation logistics that are engaged with emergency management organizations. Okay? Sure. Part of it is the understanding. Part of it is a lack of awareness. Part of it is the engagement. And then a part of it is the operational competencies you need to have, right? So the last thing that an emergency management organization wants is to bring an unvetted, untested company in to manage, help them manage
into a super stressful situation. This ain't just bumping docks with truckloads of, right, you know, pallets, whatever.
Absolutely. I mean, this is all life and limb situations, right? It's not like, oh, my package, my shoes didn't get here, damn it. You know, that's not what's happening. Exactly. It's so, and then deploying medicines. And when you're talking about even getting medicines out after you have the initial setup of where's a safe haven for the service providers going to be? They need to be sheltered. They need to eat. They need to go. They need to have toilets, right?
So are you saying? So I just want to stop you for 1 second. Are you saying when you deploy commodities to these areas, or when you transport things to these areas, are you saying you also have to deal with like housing and shelter and accommodations and things of that nature for the people that are transporting this?
Absolutely. So the logisticians are moving temporary housing, temporary shelters. Might be tents. It might be pop-up housing. It might be negative pressure and zero pressure environments, negative pressure environments, right, for medical procedures. So there's a whole array of things that need to go into getting this set up. You can't provide security and relief if the people who are providing security and relief are not secure, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So, and then you talk about things like the medical relief. So where you're sending medicines globally. So every country has specific customs requirement, because that's also a commodity that is going into the country to compete against the in-country medical supplies, right? Especially in the developing world. We're not talking about going to Switzerland where they have an array of pharmaceuticals and they could cure everything over an extended period of time because they'll figure it out. So that's what you're dealing with. And also what people are not aware of is, even though there's donations, are these medicines in date? Countries will not accept medical supplies if they're within 3 months, maybe 6 months of expiration, and it's actually deemed as something offensive. So you're saying you're sending me your leftovers. Now, so those are some of the things that you have to deal with and challenges that you have to be aware of. So once again, we talk about the points of entry. How many companies that are well established have the resources and time to be able to offer this? Now, sometimes all these organizations need is a parking lot. Yeah, it could be, if you have a truck yard that you can open up to some of these organizations so they can put tents up, or they can put cots up, or they can lay down some containers. That would be it. So part of it, as I said, is the biggest part for us is trying to make sure we get out there and say, hey, there's an awareness campaign, so that you may not think, well, I can't handle this. That's not the case.
How do you get into this, Mel? Because I mean, it's hard enough for me to just find somebody who wants to ship them household goods, right? Mm-hmm. It's hard enough for me to just get a move these days, right? How do you go out and, like, I feel like you're moving the hardest things to move, the most sporadic customers in the world. Yeah. Like, it's like sit around, wait, hurricane, boom, all hands on deck, and let's triage and figure out the situation when there's no resources and there's no, whatever. How do you even decide this is what I want to do? And
wow, that's a really good question. And there's, the more you do and some of this stuff, the more you realize there's another level that you're not as familiar with or aware of, or it's more complex, right? So before I started working with relief and development organizations, I didn't even realize this was around, right? But we all know the Peace Corps, the Save the Children's. That's what those are. They're humanitarian organizations, right?
Right.
And so I'm not giving away any secrets. They're out there, and we think, well, we'll donate some money to them, and maybe that'll be it. But they are taxed to able to deliver the services to the people who need them in developing world countries that don't have good airports, that don't have the infrastructure to get things from the port into inland, right?
Yeah.
So once I started becoming involved in this and aware of this, and it was, I don't think necessarily things happen by accident, but like, when we talked about that story about how I got to the industry, I'm always thinking that there's a call, that you get. I don't know if you're a Joseph Campbell fan, but he wrote, he was a famous American educator and author, and he wrote a book called Here with a Thousand Faces. And he basically looked at anthropologically and cross-culturally, every heroic tale has a call to heroism. They're average people typically who get this call, right? And this is to me like there's a purpose in it. What's your call, right? What's your calling? And I've always been like, well, I survived something that could have been a terrible, horrific and terrible accident. And I was like, well, and I landed with this organization that started my journey that I was like, which led to me going over to Germany and meeting Mark Muss and meeting all those folks that I retain friendships with to this day across Western and Eastern Europe. And so I think that's a part of what the mission is.
So that's giving you purpose, you feel like, and now you're taking leverage in that.
Because then after you go from this relief and development community, you realize, well, relief and development is the second or third stage in the process. After some of these countries have come out of wars, civil conflict, international conflict, right? And there's like, okay, we've gotten to a point where our government's been stabilized. So that's the stability operations. That's the next step you go from conflict. International organizations that move soldiers for peacekeeping. There's peacekeeping, then there's stabilization, then there's relief and development. So you're the third tier in a country's development, and they still don't have good roads. They still don't have great hospital equipment.
We got some comments here coming in, and I want to talk about purpose. Janet Turner says, "I want to do what Mel is doing. Love it." Emily Kazabowski, this all sounds so amazing. Thank you, Ben and Mel, for educating us.
Thank you, Emily.
That's awesome. Janet has a question. She says, does Mel work closely with our embassies around the globe?
Well, personally, I don't. The organization does, because if you're moving diplomatic community, you're always dealing with these embassies overseas. And this is not just for the people here based in the States. I mean, there's a lot of each major Western country has some type of infrastructure set up for relief and development and aid. It's the Gesellschaft für, I think it's the GTZ in Germany, I think it is. Mm-hmm. So the Germany has a relief and development organization. Switzerland definitely does. The Dutch do. The British have it used to be DFID. I know they've integrated that into another.
We got Henri from France checking in. Does France have one?
Yeah, they definitely do.
Good. Henri says, good evening, friends. Sorry for the late catch up. Interesting conversations. Henri, if you know the French organization
for relief and development, international affairs, international relations. Well, you have to think that France had a lot of African colonies as well, and some of those countries still need relief and development assistance. So usually, if you had an overseas colony, your country has an organization that is working relief and development.
So I want to talk a little bit about purpose. I mean, kind of in a broader sense, right? Because I mean, as I get to know you more every time we talk and find out and learn. So I mean, you're just like an onion, man. I just peel back. But it's like purpose obviously drives what you do. You talked about the car accident you were in, but I feel like, I mean, that might have been an event that you could point to, but I feel like it's been kind of a part of your being. How does purpose drive what you do? Where do you get that sense of purpose? What do you feel like your purpose is? Talk about purpose, man.
That's a good question. And there's a couple of things. That one is, how you're raised or your background, what your belief system is, and who influences you, right, in your life. So I come from a developing world country. So I was born in Jamaica. I wasn't raised in Jamaica, but I left Jamaica when I was 4 years old. And I think that engendered in me a sense of curiosity about people who were different.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And what challenges are they facing? I was an introvert growing up, very shy. But I was curious about people, and I was involved in sports and music, which you can't do on your own. You got to, if you're in a team, well, you can't,
Right.
but you're in a team, you got to work together with your teammates. And so you're invested in working, seeing as somebody else develops to help you improve as well, right? So it's a symbiotic relationship you've got.
Right.
Also, I was raised in a very religious family. So that was a huge part of it, that we were raised to believe that it's not about you, it's about others as well, and you should help people, help those in need. I think the Good Samaritan story is still one of my favorite stories, because someone doesn't have to look like you, believe like you, think like you necessarily for you to help them, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of that brotherhood bond that Musi and I share in that sense. There was like just a common bond.
So I'm gonna interject here, because you're getting deep, but I want to interject because Mark has also been a friend and mentor of me, especially since doing Love and Relo. So shout out to Mark. And Mark, if you're watching this still right now, between Jägermeisters, go ahead and leave something in the comments. I want to hear something about Mel that maybe we don't know. But one thing he shared with me is y'all would go out to the dance club in Orlando. And y'all would come through there like salt and pepper.
That's right, we're here.
Down there.
One of the things and I'll keep PJ about Mark is we shared. It was a funny thing because we met the first day I walked into the Interdean Munich office. I'd known Edith Poppy, and it was like an instant bond. He's English, the German. I speak some French as well, so we had this kind of connection because Mark is even as a Scotsman, he has German and French parentage, right? Mm-hmm. But the thing that we were probably very passionate about was that we both really, really loved music. Mm-hmm. And so he would come out to visit. Often when he came to the States, we'd always make sure we spent a couple of days together and just continued the bonding and the brotherhood, and I remember bringing him, and he was a guy who could fit in wherever he went. So one time he came down to see me in Orlando, and Mark was like, he loves R&B, he loves American R&B, African American artists, blah blah blah. And we went out to look at some music, and we heard some music, and he's like, Mel, come on. It's like, what are you doing? I was like, what do you got? This is it? And I'm like, Mark, you really want to go to the R&B club that I would go to? He's like, yeah, I want to go to the R&B club, and I want to go
real club.
So I said, all right, let's go. Went down to downtown Disney at the time, and there was this R&B club. Mark was probably one of 3 people that were not African American in the club. And let me tell you something, we had a blast. He started speaking as soon as he opened his mouth. Everybody wanted to be his best friend. Everyone wanted to get to know him. Said, why did you find this club? What you get? It was the point of that story is like, when you meet somebody who's like got a connection to you in your soul, no matter where you go, they're comfortable because they know that you're with them, you got their back, and vice versa. Right. And it was about who he really was as a person. It's like you really cannot make assumptions about what you see people as or what the limited experience they might have had in a certain country might be. It's about what's going on in their soul. And a mentor of ours used to say, who he introduced me to, matter of fact, would always say, the only thing I care about what's going on in here and what's going on in here. That's all that matters to me as a person.
That's fantastic. Shout out to Mark. Jamie says, such an inspiration, Mel. These stories have been fascinating. I was wondering if the suppliers that you work with have to be GSA certified. FYI, I handle government accounts for our company. And Jamie's on the corporate housing side, I believe. But yeah, would you like to?
As far as domestic federal agencies, yes, they do. So that's one of the barriers for impediment. That could be considered an impediment to be involved, right? But but part of this is also persistence. There are a lot of organizations that are not GSA on the GSA schedule that are humanitarian organizations, and you don't. But once again, it is not as easy as just saying, hey, showing up and asking for the business. You really have to put your time in. You have to create a success plan. Sometimes, look, I think people who know me know that I had a career. And one of the more interesting parts about what I was able to do is I worked for an organization that had an office in Afghanistan, an office in Libya, an office in 2 offices in Iraq, one in Kurdistan and one in actually what we call Iraq. So Erbil is considered Kurdistan. If you say that to somebody, they'll be very impressed, right? The difference, and it's really appreciated as well. And I remember there are these I still go back to those risk management days when I look at it, as part of the way I think about business, and I read risk assessments, and those I was working, I think, in the 5 of the top 8 most dangerous countries in the world.
Wow.
And so, the people who built.
Were you going over there too, Mel? Were you over there?
Listen, I'm a lover, not a fighter. At the times when it was opportunity came up, it was really when it was getting way too dangerous. I understand the infrastructural movements from cargoes, from things bringing into Karachi and onwards into up into Afghanistan. But the time that I spent in outside the country was really in Qatar. And Qatar, I spent about a year in Qatar over the course of 15 trips. Okay. And that was another level of expertise where you're talking about not anymore. It's not dangerous. It's actually quite friendly and very American friendly. Love Americans. But the issue there was understanding the complicated customs clearance process for duty exempt cargoes. Right. Yeah. So that's some of the nuances of what you end up understanding is like as you develop a niche of things where at one point, when you're moving relief and development goods into Afghanistan, you realize there's also commercial opportunities there for medium-sized and large companies as they were building up the country. That sure. You have to understand there's an expertise that if you have a duty exempt expertise, that makes you a special commodity in all this relief and development work, whether it's originating out of the UK or originating out of France or originating out of Switzerland. That's another aspect of if you have these talents, if you are in that arena, it's a benefit to your country. It's a benefit to these organizations that are looking for solutions. And that's when I put the IAM here to help hat on and say, listen, we want to have a campaign for awareness. We want you to know they're out there. And yeah, it's going to benefit. I would love to say it's all going to be me and all going to be DeWitt, but it's not. That's not even realistic. You're trying to help humanity, right? You're trying to help people who are coming out of a really difficult situation. So it's incumbent upon us to try to do as much as we can. I mean, to not to give a plug, but to tell you about the culture. The DeWitt family is one of the founding members of IAM. So they are engaged in giving back to the community. It's about what we can do to bring best practices to our fellow peers, what we can do to help our clients, and what we can do to give back to the community without expecting anything to come back to you directly, right? Good karma.
I love it. I love it. Are you going to the IAM conference this year?
Virtually, yes. We attend virtually.
Okay. Because I've been working with them on this conference, and I'm telling you, it is off the hook. Henri, we got Gordon here. Gordon, I'm going to get to your question here, and then we're going to hear some advice from Mel. I'm going to ask Mel for some personal advice for myself because I need some. Henri says there is the. Oh gosh, he's gonna maybe speak French over here. Interministeriel de la Cooperative. Okay, I'm sorry. Henri, thank you so much. I appreciate the information. If anybody wants to read that, there it is. Henri saying what up, that I can read. He's also got some more he's dropping over there. We got leads over here. We got leads. Let's see here. We got Viva. Great to see you.
Now. How are you? Good to see you, my friend. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, it's good to see you too, Viva. And then Gordon has got a question here. Gordon says, and I hear Gordon on this, right? Because here we are and we're sitting on our cushy sofas, we're getting these, seeing the news, and says, we're always told that money and relief never gets to the people who need it. It gets diverted and never reaches the needy. Any tips on how people can donate so that they know it reaches the people it's supposed to reach?
Yeah, the best way to do that, to go about it, is to donate to humanitarian organizations already established in those areas. Let's say if there's something happening I'm just pick a country and say, Chad. Go in and type agencies, relief and development agencies in Chad. Send the money to them. They've already have the infrastructure worked out and to figure out how to deliver from A to B. Money typically better. So
this is I want to stop here. I want to ask this because this is interesting to me. This is very counterintuitive to me. So you're saying instead of going to like the Red Cross, I'm just gonna throw them out there. I mean, I don't mean to use them like I don't know them from whatever, but I'm saying instead of going to like text such and such to such and such and send over money, you're saying actually go search out the NGOs or whatever in the country that's affected, give it to them, and that's a more trustworthy place to donate.
Well, probably a lot of the NGOs that are in your country of origin, whether that's Switzerland or the United States, I would say give the money to the Red Cross, as opposed to, if you have family in the country, sure, send them that money, right? But that's part of the issue. And Gordon, that's a really good question, because that's the biggest criticism that comes up. People are like, well, I can't understand. And one of the things I said earlier was that there are often hindrances to getting that money or getting that aid to the individual. So it's about, are you dealing like with Haiti people? There's hijacking. Those commodities were being if you're sending food, those things are going to be hijacked getting from port to. There's security concerns, and I don't want to badmouth the situation, because it's not the people in need, but people who are capitalizing or opportunists that are looking at how am I going to take advantage of the situation and control what's going on. There's another organization that there's an affiliation with, and I'm actually on the advisory council for an organization that offers safety and security advice for NGOs. And now this was founded by a gentleman who was actually working for a major NGO, and I can't remember the ones now, so I'll refrain from saying it. But he was hijacked or kidnapped, in the country. He had hijackings he's dealing with. He was kidnapped in his country and held hostage for a couple of weeks at least, if not longer. And one of the issues, right, exactly. One of the issues there is, oftentimes you'll send people into countries who are not prepared for dealing with safety issues, security issues. They might have a degree in international relations or governance, and sometimes it's the body that would go into the area. But what type of training do you have? So they're providing certification and training for specific country by country for what security risks they are, what safe risks they are, and that's part of it that we want to bring to the awareness of organizations that are involved in logistics. It's like, we're moving stuff, but have you done a security assessment? Have you done a safety assessment? Do you know your goods are going to get there? And on a micro level, that's exactly what happens with the money. Have you done your homework before you decide to send something to agencies? Just like any other corporation, everybody runs their business differently. Some people have spent on their balance sheet, they're spending much more money on marketing and advertising. Some are actually doing it on the ground projects, right? So do your due diligence before you send any resources. Ask them. I had a friend who's like, I want to send a bunch of water. You want to send pallets of water? I was like, no, don't send pallets of water. There's water already on its way down there. What they need is continued financial resources to pay for the logistics that are not voluntary coming in there, to buy tents that are waterproof, to get medicines to the because they have the relationship set up already, or some of the part of it is a lot of medicines are donated, but there are also services that they have to pay for that are not donated. So people sometimes think that humanitarian organizations, everything that they get is free. That's not the case.
Right. So it's better to send money than to send.
It's better to call the organization and ask them what they need. Most of the time, they'll tell you they'll need financial resources to help, because all the logistics services they get are not for free. Mm-hmm. All they still have to pay their workers at the headquarters and in the country. And a lot of the money that goes to these workers, most NGOs, people working in relief and development, most of their staff are nationals of the countries in which they work, which people don't realize. And interestingly enough, that most of the staff that are nationals of the country where the NGOs have a field office are the ones that are kidnapped or are facing incidences of violence or danger. So it's not the foreign national, it's not the European, it's not the American who are because they usually have security and they live on a compound.
Right.
But the folks in the NGOs are living amongst their community for the most part.
So interesting. I could listen to you talk forever, Mel. I got a question for you, the personal question, and a question for other people, young people who are watching this right here. What type of advice would you give to younger professionals that are in the logistics, the moving, transportation game, looking to get into it or getting into it and kind of trying to get their sea legs?
Don't listen to people who tell you can't do something. That's the advice I give to every young person, right? I remember when I said I went to learn German, people told me, oh, you couldn't do that. Okay. So, and I have a certificate of German fluency from the Gov't Institute. So it's certifiable. It's not just me thinking I can speak German. If you don't believe me, ask Martin Bush.
Yeah, sure.
He speaks better German than I do. That's the first thing. You should believe in yourself, right? Believe in yourself and believe in the vision that you have. That's I think the most important thing. Don't listen to people who tell you can't do something. If people give you advice about how you're able to tackle an obstacle, then you can listen. The second thing is, somebody told me this, and I think a long time ago, he told me don't quit. He told me, and it was someone when I was working as an insurance broker. And I don't mean don't quit a company and go find an opportunity that might be a better opportunity for you, a better fit for you, but don't quit on yourself. I told people that I wanted to go and live and work in Germany, and people were telling me I couldn't do it. I couldn't speak German. I couldn't do it. There was no program that I could get into that would give me the opportunity to go and work in German. I didn't have my master's degree. I was between that. I was like, well, I've got to spend 2 years getting that degree before I can go and do XYZ. I ended up in Germany because I was always getting pulled aside by agents when I would make calls when I'm and I'm admitting this now, I guess 30 years later, it's okay to let the people know, let the cat out of the bag. I'd go to Mercedes, or I'd go to Deutsche Bank, or go to BMW with an agent that was visiting from overseas, and they'd say, if you ever want to live in Germany,
However, if you ever want to live over here in Germany.
Right. So I got there, and I went from working in an office, wearing a suit and tie, to being on trucks, learning how to export pack, going on the road for weeks at a time, doing manual labor, which I hadn't done in probably a decade, right? And I thought, well, if I stay with a company that is reputable in this industry, is known around the world, there's a future for me. So create a plan for success. You have to create your own success plan. Be your best be your advocate, your own advocate in that, and have a plan B and a plan C for yourself. Because it doesn't always work the way you want it to work. I came back from Europe thinking I was going to pop into an international role in the States, and I ended up in Florida, and they're like, we want you to sell office moving. I was like, what? Knew nothing about it. I'd spent the first, 5 to 6 years on the whole international thing, trying to get that German under my belt so I could go back home and figure that out. And it threw me a curveball. So I had to spend some time learning at the curve and learn that aspect of the business. Learn the COD aspect of the business, even though I was trying to get back into international. So the corporate domestic, U.S. domestic stuff, tried to get back into international. And so I probably spent a third of my career doing something that I never thought I'd be doing.
Did that prepare you for doing the thing you did want to do?
When you have a wife and a child, you do what you have to do. Okay. Right. So that was the biggest part. It was like, hey, look, I gotta pay the bills. I gotta feed a family. And I gotta suck it up and do what I have to do. And like I said, you get to a moment. I remember the moment that where I woke up and I was like, wait, this is what I want to do. And when I was thinking I didn't want to change companies, I'd never really wanted to go anywhere and not ride it out. Okay, that was always my mentality. Was I'm going to stay here. I'm going to be a lifer. I had parents who worked for over 20 something years for each of the companies that they came to the States and were working for. So that was part of my thing. So to recap, I was like, don't listen to naysayers. Have a plan for your success, and make sure you have a plan B and a C for your success. And don't give up on yourself. Henry Ford named the Model T because he started with an alphabetical listings of the cars. There was a Model A, B, C, D, E, F, G, all the way down to T. And T was the one that was successful.
Yeah. So interesting. So interesting. Gordon says, I'm so impressed you speak German and went on the road with the crew. That's how I grew up. Okay. Without the language skill.
Well, thank you, Gordon. I mean, that's part of what it was too. I wanted to know what I was doing. So I wouldn't walk into a house. I don't know how you're going to pack this. And I was also under the tutelage of Mark, perfectionist Miss. He'd get the missy frown and the side eye. That doesn't look like it's packed. So, that helped a lot, working with someone who came up like that, who started, understood this. And I remember he used to tell me, it was funny, when It's like Marcus looked at me some days when he was off the trucks. I wish I could get back on the trucks. I'm like, are you crazy? That was back-breaking stuff. You know, you'd go on to unload a 40-foot container, and it's supposed to be 5 guys, and you and another guy's there. You know, and that's it. Yeah. You got to get it done. Yeah. But he really had an ethic, honestly, that was like, we have to do things the right way. We got to do things the right way. And I'm proud to say that, you know, I got a chance to work with him. I got a chance to see, and he'd break out his little Pickford's booklet where we had to disassemble the piano and show us how things were supposed to be done, and what was a part of the reason that it led to his contributed to his success. And that was also the thing that I read, and it could have been Wayne Huizenga that said it. He goes, find an industry that people are not necessarily don't necessarily gravitate towards, and you know, take that and turn it into a diamond. Be that person that makes a difference in that industry. You know, I mean, nobody really walks around thinking, oh, the glamour of the relocation of the moving business. Unless you love trucks or you grew up in the business, it's not really something necessarily you think about every day, you know, and you think about how, okay, Rory, you're never getting back on those trucks, huh? Yeah, I know. My knees tell me that every day, my friend. My knees and my back.
Mark says Mel always made sure he kept moving forward and in style.
Well, as I said, I've been very fortunate. Missy is one of those people. I see you coming up, and I see those same traits in yourself. And you know, we were talking a little bit before that, how, you know, one of the things I always admired was that how you see, and the question I would pose to you, it's like, I was fortunate to be able to see something in from working in insurance, that I knew that how expensive it was to have labor, like lifting labor. It costs a fortune. What you're paying the worker is not reflective of what you have to pay to employ the worker.
Right.
And you're going to people's homes, that liability. You have trucks, vehicles on the road. And I thought, okay, what's going to drive margins in this business? It has to be technology, because that's the only thing that's going to change. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, even if you have driverless vehicles, there's still a liability that's going to be associated with having a driverless vehicle that's going to make anything that happens, any accident that occurs, is going to cost a lot. So, from a liability standpoint, right? You still need auto insurance, and that, I don't think that's ever going down. Okay, it's never going to be less expensive to employ a human being, especially one that's literally doing heavy lifting, right? So the things that I've always loved about this, and the thing that we and I've talked about, is how you've been able to use technology to improve what you're doing, to streamline your business, to create efficiencies. What do you think? And that was the thing I wanted to ask you. What do you think, as an up and, well, I wouldn't say you're up and coming, but you're still up and coming. You know, you've established
up and coming. I hope this ain't it, man.
No, I don't think so, my friend. I think the future is bright.
I'm in the first third right now, my race right now, honestly.
The future is very bright. But, you know, as a younger person coming into this industry, what do you see as the things that we need to do to make it viable, to keep it attracting young talent like yourself, and then make it rewarding for young talent?
I think the work has to be stimulating. I think that the work, you know, when I look at the drivers who are amazing, I go on these Facebook groups and they have all these drivers, thousands of drivers. You know, the ones that are really, you know, growing are the people that are posting about their craft. You know, you're talking about Mark, you know, and the right way to do it, and they're craftsmen. I think as an industry, we've gotten away from the craft, and we've tried to streamline everything operationally to become more efficient, but that's actually hurt our margins because we've jettisoned all the high margin business. And what I mean by that is we've gotten rid of the third-party services. We've gotten rid of shipping the autos. We don't hang TVs. We don't hang artwork. We don't do put away service. Like all the stuff that was hard to do, that frankly had a lot of value and maybe required skill, we've gotten rid of, at least on the domestic side, US side. Now other parts of the world still do this because they're smarter than we are. But we've jettisoned those pieces of business, and then we complain about them, there's no margin in it. And then companies like Handy or Porch or, you know, whatever, you know, Thumbtack pop up, and now they're offering TV hanging services, you know, for $150 a pop. But we were already in the home. We moved the couch in yesterday, and yet we left that piece of business sitting there, right? And so my guys for $15 an hour, or loaded cost of $20 an hour times 2 at $40, could have hung that TV for the $150 that they're paying Handy to do it.
Right.
You know what I mean? I just left $110 on the table, and yet I'm complaining about the margins in the business. So I think making the work interesting and bringing the craft back to it, which then folds into understanding what truly adds value to our customer and offering that service, instead of thinking of all the things that we can't do like, and we hide behind liability, right? Oh, we can't do that. It's a liability. It's a liability. Well, coming out of my house every morning is a liability. Okay. Right. Someday I got to make a trade-off. I got to make a judgment call here. Okay. Because if I don't come out of my house, I can't pay the bills. Okay. Right. So I think we have to look at those kinds of things. And then I think we have to, look at different ways to market our services, right? So when I look at the companies that are disrupting the space, they're doing a lot of the same things that we've done before as an industry, right? They're just marketing them differently, right? So for instance, I'm seeing these, I don't know if you know Sue Butler. I think you might know her. I know Sue, right? And she sent me a link to a self-storage, up and coming, hottest new thing in self-storage, where, get this, Mel, you're gonna like this, they bring the stuff to you. Right. That's called a moving and storage company, people. That's been around 100 years. I saw it through this wall behind me is a warehouse, 80,000 square feet of stuff that I will hold on to and then bring it to you when you need it. Wow, mind blown. Well, guess what? We've been doing that for 100 years. So why is a company able to get a cool little teal logo for $30 and all of a sudden launch a business model that disrupts an industry that we've been doing for 100 years? That tells us we don't actually understand our customers. We don't actually understand what's important to them, and we don't understand how they buy or why they buy. So I think we need to really, really look at those things.
I appreciate all those answers, and a quick shout out to Sue Butler. She is one of my favorite people. So anyway, I think that is really interesting, because one of the things that brought to mind was, I remember when I was working in Germany, the thing that really amazed me was that you could be a master mover. There was continued designations within your profession, and I thought that kind of brought me back. One of the things that my German tutor, Frau Eva Margaret Brandt Green, used to give me was these graded readers. So it was like I learned like I was first grade, second grade, third grade, so I could build up my reading comprehension. Right. And one of those things, we actually discussed the cultural aspects of physical and manual work, that skilled work, as opposed to, as well as what you call white collar work, et cetera. And one of the things I love to discuss with one of my brothers is an attorney, and we talk about, and I'd like to say, our business is amazing because you have the opportunity every day to engage with people who may not be high school grads, who don't have college degrees, and who are multi-millionaires in one day, in one work day. Yeah. There's not too many people in his office, and he works for a government agency, federal agency, that are that disparate in their academic achievement, but they may be just as bright as someone with a PhD, right? And I remember guys would tell me, I'd never want to work in an office. I love the freedom of this. And they're very successful. They're well-traveled. They're very polished. And you know about living in Europe. Everybody on the truck speaks 3 or 4 languages. Yeah. So
you bring up some interesting thing. I want to go back to something that you touched on, but you kind of glossed over. When you look at high potential individuals, right? So I'm an office person. Okay. Right. I like sitting behind a desk. My fat butt sits behind this. I punch these emails and I make some money. It's all good. I go home. And I like stuff like this. See my wall right here? I got all these accolades and I got all this stuff, right? And trophies and whatnot. Our movers that we're complaining we can't hire enough of, our movers also, even they may be out in the field. They may be field people and I might be an office person, but the good ones have the same type of pride around what they do. Right, all the ones that we think we want, but yet we don't have a good formula. I got certification from ERC, I got CRPs, I got SCRPs, I got degrees, I got whatever, right? But there's nothing in the U.S. to my knowledge. There's no association that does that for drivers, that does that for helpers. So you could say I'm a helper level 1, helper level 2, helper level 3, driver level 1, 2, 3, whatever. You know what I mean? And then accordingly get paid X. And oh, by the way, now I know that you're certified to do that piano, you're certified to do that chandelier, you're certified to do whatever. And to me, like, where's the career path? Like, I want to know that I can work hard to move up. And then I could point to that and say, and that's why you pay me more. That's why I'm a $25 hour, guy, because I'm a level 3 guy.
Right. That is a great point. And it's one of the things that, if I can say that internally with what we've been talking about, some of these things, not just with an organization internally, but what can we do on a level across the industry to provide some types of certifications to the members, and then within the production, if you will, staff, right? What can we do to make sure that type of interesting, Henry, I don't know if they do that for the on the individuals, right? I know, right? So it's usually the office staff. Like, I know I've got, FEDE certification in sales and things like this, but and I know the standards can range and vary across the globe. But there were guys that I worked with in Germany that were master movers. And I'll never forget this guy, because he was from Bavaria, but his name was Schwabe, So anyway, they're master movers. And, I remember picking up a piece of a glass table. It's like, don't carry glass horizontally. It's always vertically. And so I fortunately didn't have to snap a piece of a glass table to learn that lesson. But, one of the things about our industry is that some of it seems to be such common sense. Like, pick this up, put it in here, blah, blah, blah. But I looked at a picture that was on the internet a couple of days ago of a container that was loaded, and there was all this space between all the boxes. And there were different boxes stacked on different boxes. And Mark will tell you, God rest his soul, our warehouse manager at the time, Jim O'Shea, would say the same boxes on the same boxes. I want to see no spaces between the stuff. And that was also, how Missy was as well. But things like that people aren't actually shown how to do this. And that's a valued, that value you bring, that just like Ben showed you his wall, we should be able to do that for our coordinators. Can do that, but the movers don't. And they're the ones that are interfacing the most with our customers. They're supposed to be a reflection of what we are as an organization every day.
That's right. And you talk about how common sense, the fact that it seems like it's common sense, I think is our biggest issue, at least in the US, is that people assume it's common sense. Oh, I'm just moving, so I'll get a U-Haul, toss some stuff, get some boys, some pizza and beer. Right? And I think the fact that it seems like it's common sense is one of the biggest hurdles. You look at professions, realtor. Realtor is a trademark. You have to have certification to be a realtor. You can go to school to be a plumber. You can go to school to be an electrician, right? I could see being a mover and being a person that knows how to handle fine art, that knows how to handle glass, that knows how to disassemble this credenza, reassemble this credenza. Perhaps there is some light electrical work as well, right? Like the water. I mean, the fact is, when we go into a home, we're taking appliances like washing machines, dry, that might be hooked up to water, dryers that might be hooked up to gas. We're calling third-party services because we're afraid of the liability. But in reality, that's what our customer needs us to do. Third-party services is hundreds of dollars more per service, right? When should be something that we should be able to do. And if we had mover level 3, he could do that, and every crew should have a mover level 3 guy, right? And so I just feel like that's how we've commoditized ourselves. And that's where we've taken the career path out of the industry. Guys like you and guys like me, you may have worked on the truck at a time, but you found a career path in this business. I found a career path in this business. I do very well for myself.
I would be remiss in saying that a lot of what one of the reasons that I wanted to, when I got back in the States especially, and even some of the friends have told me this when they saw me in Europe, I said I didn't quit on myself and I had a plan. But I would walk into, maybe, 20-something years ago, I'd walk into an office and I would be the only African-American, only Black guy that was in the office working, and I would go back into the break room, I'd see the drivers and I'd dap them all up. What's going on? How you doing? I wasn't thinking I was doing anything. But one time a senior guy who was older than I am now, he was out on the job, and he said, we're out here on this job. And I told all the guys in the office, they got to come out on the crews. I'd come out here and work to do on this job. And they said, because you didn't walk by and act like we were like nothing. You were wearing a tie, you were wearing a jacket and a tie. You didn't just blow by me. And I was like, look, if it wasn't for you guys, I wouldn't have the opportunity that I have right now. Right. And because I've been there, there's people don't want certain movers ethnically in their homes. They don't want maybe say a woman in the pack crew, and the movers and the owners who are like, no, that's not, this is America. I'm giving everybody an opportunity. If you don't want this gentleman in your house that I'm hiring and I trust enough to hire, we're going to decline your business.
Mm-hmm. Okay?
Yeah. So part of that is a lot of gratitude for those who came before me, gratitude for those who gave me opportunities, and I'm here. How many more years than I thought I would be necessarily. I didn't know anything about this when I got into it, and I took a lot of bumps along the way because it's learning. You got to learn, and sometimes it's embarrassing not to know. Hey Ed, how you doing? It's embarrassing not to know something. And I know a lot of the guys when I came in, I walked into the office when I got to Munich in a certain time in a suit and tie, and a year later, like, we saw you, thought you were going to be too soft to handle this. We didn't think you were going to be able to do this, and I was like, hey, this is a part of what it is. When I say don't quit on yourself, there are a lot of people that might not think that you can do it. You have a goal, you have a vision, stick to it. Good people will always help you. Good people will always help you. They don't care.
For sure.
Yeah.
Rory says 30 years ago, you got certifications for packing, moving, loader, driving. There were, and I want to say are still schools for movers. Rory, I've heard these rumors about these schools for movers. I don't know where they're located. I don't know who's sending their movers to these schools, but I've seen some of the agents have schools inside their warehouse, like they'll have a fake house in there that they'll move stuff around or whatever. That's interesting and all. Rory goes on to say the top certification was Master Mover, Master Packer, Master Driver. They used to give you patches for your button-down shirts and whatnot. I think that's interesting. I'd love to get
more information on that. That would be great because that's part of the things that we're trying to do is create an awareness, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We yeah, I know. I was a licensed insurance, New York State licensed insurance broker. I don't know how I got here either, Henry.
So you were the only guy that's actually licensed to sell insurance, because that's the line, right? Yeah, it's coverage. You can't call it insurance.
I think it was a 4-hour exam that I had to sit for, and you have to spent a year with and I was working on the corporate side. So, but you had to do, property and casualty, so it was a grueling examination. So I have no use for it now whatsoever.
Rory's telling stories over here. I had a lady tell him he couldn't use the bathroom. This is what happens. Our guys go on these jobs and people like fuss about the restrooms. Now I had one lady, because it was COVID and stuff, and things were crazy a few months ago and everybody didn't know what was what. But apparently Rory got kicked out the bathroom, which is I'm sorry to hear that, Rory. Went down the street and took everybody with him. That's great. I'm sure the office got a call. That's great. Beacons has a school apparently in the south suburbs of Chicago. Interesting. Mel, I could talk to you forever. This is Mel, I could talk to you forever. This is awesome. I appreciate you being here. Do you want to leave us with a final thought? No,
look, I want to say it's, I talked to you and I was a little bit hesitant to come on, and I like some of the anonymity that sticks with this, with who I am as a person. But it's been a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed it. The time has gone by really quickly. I appreciate the opportunity to come on. I want to thank everybody that showed up. Those of you I know well and those I don't know so well. It's really been a hell of a journey, and it's nice to see that you remembered and people appreciate what you're doing in the industry. But it all goes back to the people that came before me, the people that believed in me, the people that I want to inspire. And as my grandfather used to always say, one love. One love.
One love. There you go. Hey, everybody, thanks for being here. Thanks for getting involved. If you're watching this right now, hit that like button, throw a heart out there, a little round of applause for Mel. Thank you for getting involved in the comments. This was great. I really enjoyed the comments here. Thanks for being a part of the discussion. And Mel, dude, it was so good to see you, man. Thank you,
man. It's great to see you. Thank you for sticking with me and inviting me, man.
Yeah,
Yeah.
of course, man. Can't wait to see you again in person, man.
Look forward to it.